In our previous episode, a convoy rolled through the darkness of Baghdad. Above, a drone circled in silence, and in one flash of fire, Qasem Soleimani, the general who shaped wars across the Middle East, was gone. In that moment, modern warfare proved a single strike could redraw nations. But today, we trade the hum of drones for the whispers of scrolls. We leave the deserts of Iraq. We leave the age of missiles and machines, and we return 16 centuries to the marble streets of Alexandria, a city of temples and tension, a city where knowledge itself was power. Alexandria, 415 AD, a city of shadows and sharpened beliefs. At its heart stood a woman, philosopher, astronomer, teacher. Her name was Hypatia. She didn't command armies. She didn't hold office. She taught reason. She questioned power, and that made her dangerous. One morning, she stepped into her chariot. The streets were tense. The whispers had grown louder, and the mob was waiting. They didn't come with swords. They came with faith, with stones, with rage, and with a hatred reason could not withstand. What happened next wasn't just a murder. It was the death of philosophy, the end of classical thought, and the beginning of something darker. Because this is not just the story of one woman, it's the story of the eternal war between knowledge and power, a war that never truly ended. So if you think ideas are safe, if you think truth always survives, stay with us. Because tonight, we tell the story of how one woman's mind threatened an empire, and how that empire struck back. Welcome to the red pages of history, where every episode uncovers the moment a blade, a bullet, or a belief changed the fate of nations. Let's begin. She was born in a city of scrolls, Alexandria, jewel of the ancient world, where knowledge was currency and the library was sacred. Her name was Hypatia, daughter of Theon, a respected mathematician, but she didn't just inherit his wisdom, she surpassed it. She mapped the stars, she explored geometry, astronomy, and philosophy. She wrote of conic sections, planetary motion, and the secret life of numbers. And she did it all as a woman in a world ruled by men. Her lectures filled the halls. Pagans, Christians, skeptics, all sat side by side to hear her voice. She didn't preach, she questioned. She didn't command, she inspired. To many, she was reason made flesh. To others, she was a threat. For Alexandria was changing. The Roman Empire was crumbling. Christianity was rising, not only as faith, but as force. Bishop Cyril of Alexandria demanded unity. Hypatia embodied plurality. She refused to convert. She refused to choose sides. Her loyalty was to truth, not to power. And that made her dangerous. Whispers turned to rumors. She was called a sorceress, accused of bewitching the governor, blamed as the obstacle to peace. But the truth was simpler. She was a woman who dared to think freely, and in 415 AD, that was enough to mark her for death. Alexandria. March 415 AD. The morning sun was pale, the streets were quiet, but the silence was not peace. It was pressure, the kind that builds before a storm. Hypatia stepped into her chariot. She wore her scholar's robe, simple and white. No guards, no weapons, only scrolls in her satchel and thoughts in her mind. She rode through the city she had taught for decades, past the library, past the temple of Serapis, past the churches that now ruled the streets. But this morning the streets did not part for her. They closed in. A mob had gathered. Not thieves, not soldiers, but citizens, whipped into frenzy by sermons and rumors. They blocked her path. They shouted. They accused. Witch! Pagan! Enemy of Christ! She tried to speak. She tried to reason, but reason had already died. They dragged her from the chariot. Her robe tore. Her scrolls scattered. She fell to the ground, hands raised, not in defense, but in disbelief. Stones flew through the sun-baked streets of Alexandria. The first one struck her shoulder, a sharp sting that tore through fabric and flesh. Then came the others, a relentless hail of rock and fury raining down from hands filled with hatred. Her skin split under the impact. Her brow began to bleed. But she did not scream. She could not. They beat her with roof tiles, jagged and cruel from the desert sun, edges sharp enough to carve into memory. Her fingers, desperate to shield her face, snapped under the blows. Her voice, once commanding in lecture halls, cracked as she tried to plead for mercy that would never come. The mob had no ears for mercy. They were enacting a ritual, not of justice, but of purification, a brutal cleansing of knowledge, of thought, of a mind that dared to reach beyond fear. They stripped her, not merely to humiliate, not merely to punish, but to erase, to reduce a brilliant intellect to trembling flesh, to silence the fire within her mind. Her body was dragged through the streets, past the library she loved, past the governor's palace, past the places where she had taught and inspired. And finally, in the shadowed halls of the Caesareum, they tore her apart. Her body was burned, her bones scattered to the winds of a city that had turned against her. She died in silence, no trial, no tomb, no last words, yet her ideas refused to die. For centuries, her name was buried beneath layers of fear and dogma. The church erased her from memory. The empire forgot her existence. Even the library, once a beacon of learning, crumbled into dust. But whispers survived, in hidden scrolls, smuggled through secret hands, in forbidden texts, tucked into margins and passed in whispers, in the quiet admiration of thinkers who refused to bow before ignorance. Hypatia became more than flesh and bone. She became a symbol of courage in the face of overwhelming oppression, a symbol of female resistance against the weight of power, a symbol of the cost of knowledge when it threatens those who fear it. Her memory endured centuries of enforced silence. In the Renaissance, her name returned, resurrected in the minds of philosophers, scientists, and those who dared to question. Her legacy became a quiet rebellion, a testament to intellectual courage. Feminists embraced her, scientists honored her, philosophers invoked her. She became the patron saint of reason, not by canon, but by conviction, by the persistence of ideas that refused to bow. Every time a woman teaches science, every time a thinker challenges dogma, every time a voice rises against ignorance and fear, Hypatia lives again. She reminds us that truth has a cost, that progress has enemies, and that sometimes the brightest minds burn first, only to illuminate the path for those who follow. So if you have stayed with us through this journey, from the streets of Alexandria, through the violence of the Caesareum, to the quiet rebirth of her name across centuries, then you have seen what history tries to hide. Ideas are immortal. Knowledge cannot be erased. Even in death, Hypatia won. Subscribe to the red pages of history, because the next story, the next moment when courage and knowledge clash with fear, awaits, ready to remind us all that history is alive, waiting to speak.